It's a lot of smoke and mirrors with Great British Railways that we've seen so far. It's all eyes on the railways bill and how we can get it to work for the people of this country so that it is transformed into something that we can all be proud of.
They think they can create a better railway. There'll be mishaps, there'll be problems, but they have to keep the faith.
The work to rebuild Britain and return to a politics of service started the moment we entered office.
At this moment in time, does government have enough funds to properly support the rail network in the state it's in?
It's the first stop on our journey to a modern railway for a modern Britain.
C2C is being renationalised in a week's time, but I want to cover the broader picture.
I know from the very start that this will not be an easy story to tell. Not only because I'm literally watching it unfold right before my eyes as we go along, but also because it's littered with endless contracts and a lot of legislation. This story is all centred around an innumerable number of documents that most people, perhaps even including me, can't really get their head around.
Time to answer the big question. Will Britain's railways ever be great again? Welcome to the back streets of East London at just past 8 a.m. It's here that my journey to uncovering the truth about nationalisation begins. And before coming here, I spent a considerable amount of time on the internet researching to be able to write up a clear enough explanation of how it all works. It's a Sunday, and so many locals here are sleeping in late while I wander around a very industrial looking part of their neighbourhood.
So I'm standing outside of the East Ham depot and carriage sidings around the time in the morning when rolling stock is starting to enter service on the main line. Now this site is currently owned and operated by C2C Rail, but not for long, because you see this contract that I'm holding in my hand here, which is set between the DfT, the Department for Transport, and Trenitalia C2C Limited, is expiring in just a couple of days' time on the 20th of July 2025, after being active for about 4 years. And I'm going to use this contract now to explain to you exactly how nationalisation works.
This contract awards Trenitalia C2C Limited the permission to run services specifically on the Essex Thameside route, under strict conditions set out by the DfT to ensure standards are kept. During this era of privatised railways, a system was put in place where if a train operating company didn't stick to its contractual obligations, the operator of last resort, owned by the DfT, would step in to save the rail line from collapse and keep services running. Nowadays, the DfT operator is responsible for 5 different subsidies. And on the 20th of July 2025, C2C Rail will join this list of subsidies, followed by Greater Anglia in October.
And there's something called the Rail Reform Bill, which will start making its way through Parliament later on this year. And that will establish Great British Railways. And so by the end of this very long journey, this depot behind me here will be both owned and operated by GBR.
Great British Railways will not only operate rail subsidies in the UK, but it will also take control over all infrastructure, fully replacing Network Rail. This will allow GBR to be a single public body that is responsible for running and maintaining both train services and infrastructure, creating a cohesive network. This is called vertical integration.
But before any of that happens, we need to start asking questions now about whether the changes that have been promised will truly be as great as they have been made to seem. And part of making sure that nationalisation will be very successful is by following examples from the past.
Well, I think the key thing is to build on the successes of British Rail.
Christian Walmart, the UK's leading transport commentator, has kindly invited me to his home in North London. He has an extensive knowledge of railway history, and so I'm very excited to sit down with him to talk about the previous nationalised body that lasted from 1948 to 1997, called British Rail, and how it provides guidance towards how the new government body should operate.
So British Rail, for quite a long period of its time, was really struggling. It was underinvested in. It was not very well run. It had kind of a bunch of fairly conservative people in charge of it. And then in the last 10 years of its life, it got this chairman who's called Sir Bob Reid. who changed the structure of it so that it became then a series of smaller commercial concerns, so intercity, regional railways, Network South East, and a couple of freight companies. And really, power was devolved to those smaller commercial units. They were run by very effective people who had been trained in the graduate training scheme of British Rail, which was a very successful part of it. And they worked to quite tight budgets. They were required to ensure that they stuck within budget. They were a great success, and it was a great shame that it was broken up on privatization and that they didn't even keep that structure. One of the things about British Rail and the way it was run was that the managers used to go on secondment around the railway. So they would one day be working in a parcels office, and the next day they might be running the operations of a coal train, and the next one they might be a station master or assistant station master somewhere, and the next day they might be in a ticket office. And again, that's something that British Rail needs to, Great British Railways, I wish they'd drop the great, the British Railways needs to replicate and have a system whereby people learn about the railway as a whole, because the railway is an organic structure. It's an integrated organic structure. It's kind of, has lots of different aspects, but they're all interconnected.
Now we absolutely must touch on the specific topic of the Essex Thameside route. So I remind Christian that despite C2C's brilliant track record of being on time, with studies showing that it's the most reliable service in Britain, it faced some difficulties during the British Rail era and earned the name of the Misery Line.
We run 2,000 trains a week over 70 route miles of track. We're essentially a commuter railway, carrying phenomenal amounts of people, and the numbers are growing daily.
In the past, it was a poorly run line. It had bad rolling stock. It had a lot of industrial relations problems. Now, a lot of those have been solved, and it is now an effective service. It's quite an easy railway to run, though, because as it only has a limited line and a loop, it doesn't have much freight on it. It's a fairly simple process to run efficiently.
We cover the dense suburbs of East London and South East Essex, the most rapidly developing areas in Britain.
And there's no reason why a nationalised structure should not be as effective as the current privatised structure. What you need, as you need in any well-run railway, is a good management team. You need good industrial relations. You need staff who are motivated, and you need to ensure that people understand their role day after day after day of how to run a good service. It's all quite simple. It's not rocket science, but not all railways have been like that in the past, but there's no reason why they can't run an effective railway.
It's now midday, and I've ended up outside Fenchurch Street Station, C2C's four-platform London terminus. The station opened very early on in the Victorian era, in 1841, not long after the birth of the railways. We must take a moment to acknowledge its very peculiar location. It's sandwiched in between buildings and positioned right next to the City of London border, with the platforms very much deprived of sunlight and the magnificent 1854 station frontage obscured from the view of most visitors to the capital. Instead, the teeming tourists are out looking for the Tower of London as one of their sightseeing locations, which is only a brief walk away from the station. Of course it's symbolic, but it reminds us that Britain wasn't always a democracy. It's here that the monarchy once resided, holding an almighty ruling power over England from within their fortress. But centuries after the signing of Magna Carta, the power to make decisions that shape the future of our country resides in the Houses of Parliament, deeper within the capital. It is now in the responsibility of our elected local MPs and the appointed Lords to ensure that the Railways Bill 2025 will clearly set out what is expected of the nationalised system that will be GBR. It's become clear to many who have read the draft bill that it is not fit for purpose. Tireless campaigners such as Ellie Harrison are making their concerns vocal. As the founder of the 16-year-old Bring Back British Rail campaign, Ellie's seen the entire process of renationalisation and certainly won't rest until the transferal into public ownership is completed properly, so that the railways run fully in the public interest. We talk about this and more right in front of Parliament on College Green.
So Ellie, I read an article recently where the RIA said that key rail decisions cannot wait until the launch of Great British Railways. So I just wanted to know, what's your take on this?
Yeah, there are issues at the moment because we're kind of in this limbo state where we're sort of half in the privatised system and half in the new publicly owned system. And the private rail companies obviously are still operating and they are lobbying like crazy to try and hold on to the privatised system that has made them so rich over the last 30, 40 years. It's the competition law which is the key taboo in the rail industry, and that was introduced in 1993. And unless you take it out of the new legislation altogether, we're going to continue to have all of these contradictions.
From the moment the railways were privatised in 1993, there have always been calls to bring back public ownership. But despite constant pressure from people like Ellie, it took nearly 3 decades for a major step forward to be taken by the government.
It was a Conservative Party that came up with the concept of Great British Railways. It was a Williams-Schapp report that came out in 2021. So Keith Williams started on that, I think, in 2018. I mean, I'm sure Grant Shapps was over the moon when Labour came along and took up his project. Basically, all we know about what Labour want to do is set out in this document they released in February, which was alongside a public consultation, which will lead into the Railways Bill. And there's lots of great sounding stuff in there, stuff that I want to hear as a passenger, that we're going to have a simplified system, that's run in the public interest, that's going to do away with all the complex interfaces that we've been stuck with as a result of privatisation. But at the same time, there's loads of contradictions in there because they're saying they're going to have a Great British Railways website, an app, which sounds good. They're going to retail tickets at stations. Great British Railways will be doing that. But they also want to try and create a thriving market in third-party ticket retail.
And here's a topic that's been coming up in the news a lot lately. 2 words that make many people groan with frustration: open access. This is private companies running on the railways in competition with the public operator.
It's a completely mad system, and that has to stop because that will prevent the key benefits of public ownership going forward, particularly an integrated national timetable. And it will also continue to sap huge amounts of profit out of the system.
Something that many of you probably aren't aware of is that approximately 87% of rolling stock on UK railways don't belong to the train operating company.
The UK is the only country in the world that has the system that we have, where we have 3 private companies that act as middlemen, leasing the trains to the private rail companies, and all they're interested in is sweating their assets and making as much money as they can and not having a long-term strategy to replace rolling stock. So we really need the government to look at that issue seriously, and for all new rolling stock that public money is going into in the future, that should be publicly owned, and we need a public ROSCO that can have a long-term strategy, can be buying really well-class trains that have full accessibility standards built into them, and it's that everywhere on the network gets that.
We want to ensure that where there are profitable parts of the railways, that profit can be staying in the system and be used to bring down the cost of fares.
We need to encourage more and more people out of their cars, out short-haul flights, onto the railway. The only way we're going to do that is if it is cheaper than driving and flying, and if you can walk up on the day that you need to travel and just buy a ticket that's not going to cost the earth. That's my dream as a passenger.
But I realise now that there's still one important thing to consider. It's only politicians, rail enthusiasts and those who work in the industry who really understand the technical details of nationalisation. the government wants to assert the public that rail renationalisation is going to plan and that their commute will soon improve. So when people see stickers plastered on the side of their trains that say Great British Railways coming soon, some small inkling of hope is instilled. It's only us that know the full truth.
And then I saw this logo on the internet and it absolutely gives me the icks. It's a combination of two very simplistic designs, the bars and arrows, which represents the duality of railway tracks, and the Union Jack, which is our nation's flag. And Sean O'Grady, who is a writer from The Independent, described it as a depressing artifact of Brexit Britain. And I have to say, I absolutely agree with him. And I can't believe that there is a possibility that a logo like this might be plastered all over UK's railway stations. It just doesn't sit with me.
I think that we always underestimate the power of protest. It takes a joint effort of people fighting for the same cause to create long-lasting change.
Power and profit. Power and profit.
I reached out to Britain's largest specialist transport union, RMT, to request for a statement to be written on behalf of the members to tackle the issue of outsourcing. RMT's statement was published on their website. It says that the union fully supports Labour's plan to create GBR and to unite track and train under a single publicly owned body. However, cleaners working for Bidvest Noonan on C2C trains and stations will not enjoy the same benefits of public ownership as their colleagues directly employed by the train company. During the 2024 election campaign, Labour pledged to undertake the biggest wave of insourcing in a generation, which would benefit thousands of RMT members. RMT General Secretary Eddie Dempsey said that Labour must keep its promise, so all railway workers can reap the benefits of public ownership and greedy private contractors can no longer extract obscene profits from the industry. Eddie goes on to say, our members working for Bidvest Noonan deserve decent pay and the same terms and conditions as their colleagues, and we will fight tooth and nail to achieve it. Since this statement was published, there has been more evidence shared online which exposes concerning issues around the staff's working conditions, including breaches of PPE and cost regulations, and other things that are just shocking to read.
So we were sat back there with Ellie Harrison on College Green, which is a very good representation of how the game has changed for politics in the UK. Many years ago, we would have the press and the public sort of being able to coexist with each other. But now, political leaders are being whisked away onto these temporary platforms that are being set up on the green for interviews. And this sort of makes us think, does the public really have any kind of influence on organisations like Great British Railways, which are in public ownership? Do they have an influence on the decisions that are made around how that will function and how it will operate?
Without the public input, we may forever be asking ourselves that same question which keeps coming around. And now for the final leg of the journey. My riverboat drops me back outside the Tower of London, and we're now in the thick of the commuter hour. So we quickly pocket our Oyster cards and purchase returns to Chalkwell Station on the seaside. I say we because on this lightning fast class 357 train, I'm joined by my friend Michael, who will be helping me out today on this trip.
At Benfleet Creek, we see boats drawn up on the mudflats leading to Canvey Island. We pass the majestic ruin of Hadley Castle, looking as it did in Constable's masterpiece Lee-on-Sea. We've always been the Londoner's line to the sea, and leisure travel remains an important part of the business.
But neither of us live anywhere near the coast, so we have no understanding of what the general local opinion on rail nationalisation is. That's why Michael's drawn a rather excellent prompt on a piece of foam board to see whether any commuters or passers-by have a moment to speak to us.
Does anyone have a minute? No, you're all in a rush to get home. I respect that. Hi, sorry to bother you. Do you have a minute? We wanted to ask a few questions about your local train company.
We are completely dismissed majority of the time, but there are an odd few who do have a moment to spare, and some of them have actually done their research.
I think it's probably good because I think people owning things and things being owned by the government rather than companies that are siphon off profits is probably usually a good thing.
The general public think, oh, the railways are getting nationalised, it's a great thing. But actually, if you look at the detail, what Labour are proposing at the moment is not that different from what the Tories wanted to do.
I think ultimately it's a good thing, but whether or not now is the right time is the next question. And that we can only see with more time and as time goes on. But the only thing is the ownership is changing rather than actually the whole system being revamped and made fit for purpose. If you look at other European countries that have successful nationalised rail systems, they're cheap, they're affordable, and they're efficient.
A lot of people think that with nationalisation the ticket prices might go down.
Yeah.
And so far, from what we've heard of the government, they're going to pretty much stay exactly the same, or might even go up. I mean, not like dramatically, but they raise the price each year.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of evidence at this stage that that's going to stop.
We would be in that situation anyway, where there kind of is always an increase of some sort every year. What I would hope is that increase will go towards improving the line and doing
rather than going to shareholders.
Rather than going to shareholders.
Yeah.
So
I would say they share our scepticism about whether or not it'll actually lead to any improvements.
Skepticism won't get us anywhere. There's just a week left to wait for C2C to finally come under public ownership on the 20th of July. And in the weeks, months and years that follow, we'll learn whether the C2C rail service can get any better at all than it already is. Sat on the bench right behind the seafront, I know that this certainly isn't the end of my journey. I'll be following this story over the next few years as contracts expire and GBR is established, and I'll still be asking the same question: will Britain's railways ever be great again? It's 5 a.m. on Sunday morning at the eastern terminus of the C2C line. Welcome to a very quiet Shoebury Nest station. It's been a busy morning for C2C managers as the contract handover process has taken place. This is the end of Trenitalia's journey with the Essex Thameside route, but the start of a new one for the DfT, as their very first service to Fenchurch Street comes very slowly into service after leaving Shoebury Nest Depot, with Union Jack coloured livery that announces Great British Railways is coming soon. Only 15 minutes ago, I purchased what has now been confirmed by C2C as the very first ticket of a nationalised C2C service bought from a ticket machine. A small claim to fame, probably not as big as that of the driver who is hauling this Class 720 train to the London terminus. We're pulling out. It's still making the old C2C announcements. How about this? Welcome aboard this Great British Railways Essex Thameside service to London Fenchurch Street. Anyways, we're aboard, going past the depot very early in the morning, and it's great. It's the first service out. Aboard this service are two C2C directors who tell me just how challenging this transition has been. Meanwhile, the Sunday morning commuters are unaware of how important this train journey is. Soon enough, the towering buildings of London appear in the grey morning sky, and with two other train enthusiasts aboard, we arrive on the platform at Fenchurch Street.
How are you feeling? A new era.
I caught up with our driver to ask him how it felt to be a part of such an important moment in this line's history.
I think it's a little bit nervous with all the directors on board, but it was a smooth journey, no issues, and on time, which was the most important thing. I've been with C2C for probably about 7-8 years now, and for it to go back to GBI, it's been, like I say, very exciting and looking forward to the future.
Though I'm happy to meet up with fellow rail enthusiasts, I'm distracted. I look at the stickers on the side of the C2C train, and I'm taken back to my conversations with Ellie and Christian a week before. I'm still asking that same question that I don't believe I've managed to answer just yet.
We still got a huge fight on our hands because everything's at stake with this railways bill. So that's why we're really ramping up the campaign again, and will be over the next couple of years, because it's what goes into that legislation and how Great British Railways is created as a public body needs to put the public interest first.
The railways should be kind of technologically more advanced than they were 30 years ago, and therefore operate in a better way for the passengers.
You know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We need passengers to see the difference. They need to actually see the difference. When they go to catch a train, when they go to buy a ticket, is it cheaper? Is it easier? Like, is it more reliable? Like, that's what I've been campaigning for the last 16 years now. Like, if we can go, yes, 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 Great British Railways is better for the passenger experience, then nobody would ever be crazy enough to propose reprivatising it.